This is the journey to one Africa.
And just say it's a war between now Palestine and Israel. From Israel's side, it has been declared as war against them. As we know, like 2 days ago, there's been an attack. From the developing stories that we've been seeing, it's that the Hamas in Palestine started firing rockets from nowhere. I think the Israelis were not expecting this this attack. It was a surprise attack. I mean, they're talking about between 2,000 or 4,000. It's just different numbers in terms of the rockets that were fired into Israel's territory, and also even breaking the border lines between Palestine or the Gaza region into Israel, and people being held hostage as well. And and Israel has also responded from their side, and they've declared war, that it's war against them, and it's all now war from their side, and they've started targeting the military installments in the Gaza section, or in the Gaza Strip. So we've been seeing a lot of developing stories in terms of that, and we've seen even people that have been held hostage from Israel. Now the Hamas group, they're talking about having some hostages that they'll probably be trying to use as a leverage to get some of their prisoners out or released from Israel. So it is a big story, and it's a story that has been we know that this wars didn't begin now. It's been an ongoing wars, and some of this wars, it's not something that has to do with 1948, because I know a lot of people tend to look at the history from 1948, the 1967 wars and stuff, where the re-establishment of the Israel as a nation again. People tend to sometimes look at it from that perspective, to say Israel it's an apartheid a regime, it's oppressing the people of Palestine, and also some of the issues about even some territories that Israel has been using or taking from the Palestine in the West Bank region. There's been a lot of stories regarding this, but we know that the history, it goes far beyond that. The state might have been re-established now, but the state of Israel has been, it's an old state as well. And but then, yes, we know that there's always these different views about the people of Gaza, or the Palestinians, feeling that they are oppressed by Israel, and also not recognizing the state of Israel as an independent state, and always calling them as occupiers and all those words that have been used. And also the Jews as well, they believe that it's also their homeland, and they believe that they have the rightful place to be there, and also the state of Israel as a state to be recognized internationally as a state and as an independent state. But we know that has been a big divide between people who sympathize with the Palestinian people, and tend to say Israel is a apartheid state, because they feel that they are oppressing the people of Palestine. But on the same hand, when you look at this war now, not really looking so far much back, looking at the developing story now with this war, we are seeing that there's a lot of Hamas as the sort of a military wing of the current government in that part of the world. They're the ones that first started with this, and also, I mean, capturing civilians, and obviously just firing rockets at even the innocent people, because in all the wars, eventually the innocent people are going to be affected. And when Israel also retaliates, the people will say, now Israel, you are bombing the places where there's civilians. And Israel has always also said that the Hamas group has been using people as a human shield. They'll provoke Israel and then hide between the community so that they don't get attacked. So it's always on both sides. They're all pointing fingers on each other, and also what's this? when for example, when Hamas triggered this war now currently, when they fired the missiles into Israel wasn't really prepared, wasn't even thinking of any war with them. And now obviously, as any independent state, they're also trying to retaliate, to say, hey, cannot attack our people, cannot attack our land, and we just fold our arms and stay there, you know. So but we know this is a really this is a historical wars. This dates far back, before even now what is now called the new state that is Israel. But as a state, Israel is it's a nation that has been there for thousands of years. It's not some state that just started in 1948 or 1967 or whatever people would like to reference some of this history. But it's an interesting place where it depends on where you fall into. And there's been a question that you've asked, His Excellency, where how is it affecting us in Africa, and how does it affect this war? How does it affect us?
Before we go there, His Excellency, because I wanted to get a recap of this, especially for someone who maybe do not know anything about what is happening. So I want us to dive into that first before we go to this question and start answering this question, right? So I hope I did not cut you. You were about to go there, right?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Oh yes, His Excellency. So I stopped you there for a while. I'm gonna bring in our two brothers that are here in the studio right now with us, right now, as well, to hear, you know, if there's any information that they would love to give. Because we don't want to really go into all the details of this thing, because the goal of this stream is not to talk about this war, but basically to talk about the side of Africa by using what is happening, because what is happening there is actually affecting the entire world when you see it in the bigger picture. And you see right now, as the US siding with Israel, there are nations that are siding with Palestine as well. So everybody's choosing their side, right? At the end of the day, it's no longer Israel and Palestine then war, but all these nations across the world, they'll be in a war, right? This is how the World War I started, World War II, started, and we don't know, what is going to happen after this. So it's very important for us to talk in the perspective of Africa and to see, all right, so what are we going to do? Because what is happening here is going to affect all of us in one way or another, and we're going to talk about how it's going to affect us. So without wasting time, ladies and gentlemen, let me take a moment to invite my brother Gamma Cuba in the house, and my brother Han Star. Yeah, I don't want to call you by your name because I don't know if you want me to call you by your name, because you did not write there. So I'm just gonna say that. Gamma Cuba, welcome to the family, man. It's good to have you, brother. How are you?
Colleagues, I'm so well. I'm super excited to joining you tonight, and I'm super interested in hearing views, and I share my own views as well. Thank you so much. I pass my greetings to Ezra.
Appreciate sir. Appreciate
it.
Well, we have our brother Nikki as well in the family. Nikki, welcome, man. It's good to have you once again.
Thanks for having me here. Yeah, you can go by Nick. That's why I go everywhere. This is shorthand for Head and Shoulders Above the Rest. That's what it stands for. But because that's my YouTube channel. But yeah, I have that there. So yeah, thanks for having me here. I'm just going to say this short comment, and then once we get in, then I'll be speaking later.
Definitely. So you gentlemen, do you have anything that you'd like to add in the recap of what His Excellency said about the situation and historical background a little bit? We're not really going into details, but if there's anything you want to add right before we go to this question, then you can go ahead, and then we'll dive into this question.
I guess I'll start by going.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, this whole tension is a buildup of so many decades and decades and decades, and really goes back hundreds and even further than that. But if we want to go to the modern context, where Britain had them as a colony, and then decided to form them and say, hey, here's Israel on top of Palestine, because it was called Palestine at first and whatnot. And so, I mean, the tensions there, they couldn't handle it anymore. They said, man, let's get out of here. And there you go. Obviously, the U.S. is always backing up what the current regime is for whatever their own personal reasons are. And yeah, that's kind of the background that I would give as an overview there. Otherwise, what I've seen from Black people worldwide, we really don't too much concern ourselves with what's going on over there, other than a humanitarian issue. That's what I have seen. So from a historical standpoint, it's like, okay, you need to stop the suffering and stop the torture of what's going on with the people there, because that's not right. But outside of that, us personally getting involved or taking sides, I think the regular, average, everyday person, including myself, we don't really take a side, because there's the so-called two-state solution, and then the one state, and some people are like, yo, reset it back to where it was, and then everybody pull out and let them handle it on their own. I think that approach, me personally, if you just like reset it where it was, pull out, let them scrap it out, because all the meddling makes things worse, then let them handle it on their own. Obviously, there's going to be some things that happen, but obviously that's what they have to handle on their own. So that's what I have to add with that right now.
I appreciate Nick. Gamma Cuba, my brother.
Colleagues, thank you so much for this platform. First of all, I'm an emerging theologian with theological background. I'm emerging because I'm not accomplished, right? But this is something that I have, intricate reflections on, and I would like to give, a fervent viewpoint, right? And we must understand we are not just dealing with a political issue, we're dealing with theological issues, right? Theological history is not, in general, secular history. This is religious history, right? And so what you have the Judeo-Christian, Islamic point of view that says, from Adam to Noah, from Noah to Abraham, from Abraham to Isaac, and then, Ishmael, and then there's this spread, right? And so, this is something then that's definitely connected to, the convictions of the people. That's the first thing, and convictions are not spiritual only, colleagues. They're also very psychological. We must always remember that religion is a bridge that transfers values, cultures, and systems into societies. And so I would like to contribute and say the first thing that we must accept is that, we're going to deal with very sensitive topic that affects a lot of people's convictions and views and so on. Whether it's Palestine or Israel, these are convictions. And whether we agree historic or non-historic, these are convictions. And so we can't just, brush it with a little bit of Abrahamic covenant and quality to make it feel nice. We're going to have to deal with the intricacies with a realistic point of view. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that, Gamma Cuba, and I'm glad. I did not know that you have that knowledge, but it's a pleasure to have you, because now I know our session will go pretty well. Yeah, so guys, let's dive into this topic. We are talking about how the war and what is happening right now is going or is affecting Africa. And His Excellence, you're about to start that. I'd love to give you a floor and to share about that and your view about this matter.
Yes. Regarding how should we now go to the part where how is it affecting us and as Africa? I thought Gamma wanted to say something, but anyway. So yeah, regarding how it's going to affect us, I think right now this is way bigger than if we had to look at Russia and Ukraine in terms of choosing sides and all that. Somehow nations will be forced to choose, sort of pick which side are you into and which side do you support, on what ground do you support it. And I must agree with Gamma there about the historical background, where there's more to it than just what we know as a state today, and the wars that are happening, as also Hansta as well said, that this is like something that is historical. It's something that it started a long time ago. It's not something that starts now. We know biblically, yes, some of some of these things are on record, and those who sometimes follow even the Holy Bible, they even have a reference some of the prophecies, and others have already passed. Others, they still believe they are still coming. And looking at this history, or looking at how it's going to affect Africa, somehow, if you look at even with the war in Ukraine and Russia, somehow Africa was forced to choose a side, and many African states, they had to choose the neutral state because they are benefiting on both sides. It's not sometimes it will be a matter of you choosing side because of economics, or you choosing a side because of past history. You've helped me before, and I want to return the favor now because you once helped me, especially with many African countries. When you look at the history between Africa and Russia, with their liberations movements, were really most of them were funded by the Soviet Union. Hence, somehow they have a soft spot for Russia, and they'll not really side with the US when it comes to such cases where they'll have to take a harsh stance against Russia, even, you know. So coming back to this case of now Israel and Palestine, it's also where the first division I'll start with is belief systems. We've seen that a lot of belief systems, people now get divided according to, you side because now you're a Christian, you side with Israel. You're a Muslim, you side with Palestine because you feel that the Palestinian brothers are in the struggle, they are in an oppression. So there's been that divide. Hence, even Israel, whenever it was most of the wars, if you remember, even now, Israel at some point didn't really have a lot of good relations with the surrounding nations. Ask yourself, because most of the wars that were against Israel, the modern wars, not talking about the old wars, like the modern wars that happened, most of them, it was the nations around that fought against Israel because of Palestine. So this is something that can still put us again into the same scenario where Israel the other nations around it, because of brotherhood, people can still gather and say, our brothers are in struggle, we'll join forces and we'll go and fight Israel. And hence, even the US, how the US comes into the play, where it stands mostly with Israel, is the same thing as well, where they will say, our interest, we side with Israel because of our interest, because of our belief system, and also our collaborations that we've already done before. So that's where the divide comes in. And also looking at superpowers being involved in terms of who chooses the sides, that's where now nations will decide. And you might see again a lot of nations saying, no, we'll remain neutral. We're not going to support Israel. We're not going to support Palestine. Because if you side with this side, financially or economically, you might not benefit, or you might lose some of your benefits that you were getting. We've seen that a lot. Even South Africa was under a lot of pressure to choose a side, but it kept on saying, we'll remain neutral, and also being forced to arrest the Russian president if he had to come for the BRICS summit. But they tried to remain neutral, but there was a push to say choose. So another thing, it's gonna be political, it's gonna be religious. The division is gonna go there. And looking at this, Africa, the northern part of our continent, we know mostly it's the belief system. Most people there believe in Islam. Some of them, they still believe they really are in solidarity with the Palestinian people. And then you look at the Christian side as well, will say, no, Israel is our holy land, and out of all the holy land, out of the holy places, religious holy places, it seems like Israel is the only one that's targeted. But when you look at other places of so-called holy places of other religions, they are not targeted. No one is threatening to say, because you guys are there, we will fight you, or we'll go and destroy this. So you'll get people obviously be divided according to say, Israel is our holy land, we will protect Israel, we will side with Israel regarding this. some might say, no, but you are oppressing people. Israel needs to be wiped out of the map. We've seen some political talk from countries like Iran saying Israel must be wiped out of the face of the earth. So obviously Israel will say, oh, okay, we are being threatened. They'll also arm themselves. They'll be ready to say, we'll defend their land. They'll also defend their place. And whether people say, no, Israel, we're not going to recognize it, it is a state. And people have to now accept it. Whether they accept it or not, they have to accept it and try to get the two parties to come together to get peace, to negotiate, share the land if the lands need to be shared. All those things need to be addressed, but not emotions and belief system to be put in place. But then we are going to see ourselves going into that, because in most cases with this, we know when the US comes in, chances are we're going to see NATO coming in. All the nations in NATO will just have to toe the line. This is our stand. And then you have all the countries that are not aligned with NATO. There will be another side. And it's just going to be interesting to see the developing stories in the coming weeks, days. And if you look at this, it's like it took away all the attention that was on Ukraine and Russia at the moment, because everyone looked at the importance of Israel and Palestine.
Absolutely. You say something very interesting that I think even people who are watching here, you guys should think about it. I see a lot of comments about, this topic and what we talk about here today. We are actually with you guys. We're together with you. But remember one thing that His Excellency has mentioned here, that anything that is happening in this world, like for instance, Ukraine and Russia, you have seen the pressure that it was on Africa to push us to decide and to choose the side, which side to be on. And you all know which side we were being pushed to go with. The same thing is going to happen with what is happening right now. So in Russia and Ukraine, maybe we're not prepared. And that's why we're having this conversation today. And also, I remember what Nikki shared before at the beginning, I think he shared something that it just jumped right now. But I think it's very important for us to have these kind of conversation because it helps us to see things clearly in our perspective. That I remember what Nikki shared. Nikki shared about it's very important for whatever conflict that is happening in the world to leave it between those two countries, to leave it between Palestinians, to leave it between Israel for them to figure out. But when you start seeing one nation coming and join, that there's a lot of nations that are coming behind them and joining, and the enemies of that nation, they're gonna go to the other side, right? And eventually Africa as well, it will be forced to choose the side. And guys, some of our leaders that we have, they will choose side. We'll see it happening here, right? So that's why we're having this conversation, just in case if you're not still getting what we are trying to say here. So before I welcome Nick to share his opinion, and then we'll go to Gamma, we have our brother here, Niger, just joined us as well. Niger, say hello to the team. It's good to have you here. Welcome, brother.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well, man. Welcome back.
Awesome. What was the introduction you had, so I can catch up?
I'll tell you, but in the moment we were just talking about, we did a little bit of recap of what is happening with the situation in Israel and Palestine. That was the recap. We've done that, we finished with that, and now we are talking about the topic of today. What is the effects this war is going to bring to our continent. So I was about to let Nikki share his opinion, and then we'll go to Gamma Cuba, and then we'll come back to you, Nigel. All right, hang in there tight.
Okay. All right.
Appreciate it, brother. Nick, you're next, brother.
All right. So in terms of this, on how it's going to impact the rest of Africa, as I was thinking, as you guys were speaking here, I just realized all you have to do is really just pull up the map on where Israel is, and that's kind of like a corridor. So think about how Africa is now getting closer to China and Russia. Well, that's a gateway. This would be a perfect spot for, let's just say it was, because it seems like it is. The Israeli president was just about to be ousted. Like this guy is very unpopular. People are going against him, and then poof, this pops up. Like this pops up, and now he's like, yeah, I'm leading the charge. And then that has basically dropped. Even he was so unpopular that even the United States was kind of distancing themselves for him. That's how bad it is. And US usually is like, everything that they do, we're behind them 100%. But if you look at the map, and I'm glad you pulled it up, there's almost no way to get around where that is. Think about China, Russia, or anybody trying to send resources into Africa and do business right there, other than obviously going by boat or by plane. But a lot of movement is still done by trucks, by trains, and everything. Like most of movement around the world, when you're talking about different continents and different states, aka countries, is done on land. So this is a major spot. Now, what we notice is that no matter if some country is having a civil war, I can guarantee you right now in Sudan, if Sudan is having a war right now and it gets worse and worse and worse because it's kind of got hijacked by the West. Well, Goodyear, the tire company, is still going to get their business. KFC, McDonald's, whatever, they're still going to get their business. But something tells me that this particular situation right here is going to block off a lot of resources into Africa. I mean, that is a huge blockade. The equivalent to how India is to the rest of Asia is how this spot right here, what they call the Middle East, is to Africa. Because that spot, that corridor right there is blocking off Egypt, is blocking off Sudan, Libya, Eritrea, and the rest of the locations. You can kind of get in through the tip of Jordan if you really look at it, but I don't know how big that border is. I haven't been there personally, but looking on the map, zooming in, there's like a small tip, I think, but I'm not sure. So even still, that's kind of landlocked. That's my perspective here, that it's going to start slowing down. It can't stop it, but it's going to slow down drastically the land transportation, especially when we look at this as a geopolitical thing. The U.S. and the West is going after Russia and China. That's everybody knows this. It's not, they're not even hiding it anymore. So at first it was just Russia, Russia, Russia. Now they've literally come out and was like, we need to decouple from China. So in that case, since this is a whole geopolitical thing and Africa gets caught in the crossfire right now, being weak, that's what happens when you're not really strong. You kind of get stray bullets, stray bombs, and everything. So Russia and China is expanding into Africa. They're making it very loud and clear, more than even South America. And I think for obvious reasons, because they're literally connected. But the US and NATO has now expanded into Africa. Like, wait a minute, how come that went from North Atlantic to what kind of African country is North Atlantic? No, there's none. But they're now expanding into Africa. And I can guarantee you this, or almost guarantee, because I can't guarantee that at all. But I can almost guarantee you that this is going to affect the resources, like that grain deal where Russia said they're going to give free grain to certain African nations and everything. That's going to slow that down drastically. And I think that's what it has to do with Africa, if we were to connect it right there. Because I don't think that this happens in a vacuum. A lot of times they already can predict. They've shut down many other movements, but this one seems like it caught them off guard. I'm a little bit skeptical of it, but again, whether it's real or not, I think the situation, a chaotic situation, are used by those in powers to make sure they get more power. And I think this is going to be a handicap to the rest of Africa. I almost guarantee it. And that's my thoughts on that so far.
Yes, sir. Wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Come on, Cuba.
Thank you so much for such a detailed engagement, and I think it really touches on something. Funny enough, what our brother Nick highlights on is the reason that particular strip of land in history became significant. Of course, we bring in spirituality into it, because we're people of, you'll forgive me, my son with me, because people were spiritual people. Human beings live from inside to outside. But the fundamental reason why Israel became significant is because it was a trade route. It still is a trade route. And, when there were no flights to fly above, and now people still have to use trucks, the Roman Empire needed it, Asia needed it, Africa needed it more so, and the whole world needed that strip of land. And so the context around that piece of land, which then was occupied by, the semi-nomadic people called the Hebrew, who just happened to be in that space, right? Then they would be attacked by the Romans, by the Egyptians, by the Asians, and then somehow that trauma then all of a sudden develops and, creates hostility against everybody. Everybody's here to get us. And I want to put into context, there is nothing rich about Israel in terms of mineral resources. It is a dry piece of land that is rich only in tourism. Here in South Africa, it is the size of Kruger National Park. And, of course, with a massive GDP of 480, billion dollars, South Africa is like 419 or 411 billion dollars is GDP. But what Israel has been able to do, it has been able to position itself through its religious history to becoming the center of the tourism of the world. And second to that, what Israel has then been able to do through religious propaganda. I'm a Christian, a believer, a bona fide, but also I'm an activist and a realist. And so what I realized when Israel, after 1945, a number of the so persecuted individuals who moved from Germany and the rest of the world into, East Africa. First of all, we have to challenge the notion of it being called the Middle East. We don't know who's determining what's the middle of the world. Who is the center of the world? Britain, another small strip of land, is the middle of somewhere. This is nonsense. You'll forgive me, guys. I'm a little bit of a radical, right? And secondly, they call it, Middle East, east of where, and so, so we have to be realists. So Israel then positions itself through religious propaganda, and then we have a bunch of people that drive themselves into that space, and then they develop an ethno-state. And actually, a research at Harvard said Israel is one of the most successful ethno-states in the world. Beyond that, Israel then, after the Second World War, then pushed, the startup nation agenda, where they then say we are going to be the strongest in terms of military development in technology. So where they are strong, they import, they import and, mineral resources maximally to develop their technology. They supply technology, farming technology. So Israel is a startup nation. Every corner, is filled, with a startup, a small business that's, of course, Jewish owned, whoever Jewish people are. We cannot speak the notion of, Jewishness without necessarily mentioning that there's been some Jewish people who are overlooked in the state. The Igbo people of Nigeria, the ones in Ethiopia, the Lemba people of Zimbabwe, the Lembas of Limpopo, let alone that the African traditional religion has similarities to the ancient Hebraic culture that was practiced, before Israel. So there's a lot of discrepancies here. And I'm not anti-Israel, neither am I, anti-Palestine. I'm pro-humanity here, because for me, the choice is obvious. But the politics are, we are dealing with, a strong, propaganda that's driven through human being psychology. And I want to give just a little bit of background of the word psychology. The word psychology comes from the Greek word psyche. The word psyche just means, it means, spirituality. What is psychology? Psychology is the audited version of spirituality that human beings can understand, can record and repeat, and then share with human beings, right? So the word psyche is the word spirituality. It's nothing too deep. It's not spiritual. It's just what human beings have done. They took analogy and what they can understand of the human mind, and they put it together. And this is the propaganda we're dealing with. People who are so convicted with religious sentiments that have to do with this piece of land that is in the middle of nowhere, that cannot produce anything except grapes, and so on. And so then all of a sudden we say, how does it affect us? Do you see the background? All of a sudden the background then rubbishes this nonsense that how this affects us, guys. Because here we do have an obvious victim. And the victim is not religion, guys. In actual fact, religion from both sides is the perpetrator, right? And the victim is human beings. And the second perpetrator, colleagues, is capital. I am a capitalist. And I know very well that the fat pockets that grow are the manufacturers of ammunition. And so we are here. And if we try to make this religious history and make it a geopolitical concern for Africa, of which in my view it is not. And though I'm a Christian, I'm also a South African, and a South African that has relations with Palestine, that also, recognizes Nelson Mandela's statements to Palestine. But today in a current South Africa, it is absurd for us to stand with Nelson Mandela, or as a Christian to stand with Israel, because we have no clue who Israel is. But as a human being, I am sure, colleagues, that geopolitically this will not impact us, not even an inkling, with current wars in Africa that are happening. But it will impact the religious communities, the tourism to Israel. That strip of land will die. We will no longer spend African rands and African dollars and kwatas in Israel. And people who are dedicated and pilgrims who want to go walk where Jesus walked. Funny enough, the Jews there don't even believe in our Jesus, I believe in Jesus, but the Jews there don't believe in this guy, And so the tourism will be impacted, not our tourism, but it will be our religious pilgrims that will be affected. So I want to put that statement. It will not affect us in my view. It will affect a number of other people. Africa is not an island of its own, but Africa is not a country, guys. This is a continent. Mika always says of 55 countries, the diaspora, is the 55th. So Israel will be impacted, but also, there's a lot of innate, difficulties that have to do with this. And so our concern should actually be human beings. In actual fact, we should, start a disarm campaign. Not an anti-Israel or an anti-Palestine campaign, a pro-human campaign to say the human beings who are affected by the financiers of this war, and by the religious fanatics who are behind this war. They are part of the problem. And I know a lot of people then will draw some lot, of religious prophecies that are taken out of context. But I think, there are people who are currently suffering. I know that in Palestine, almost 11,000 kids were killed. But I also know that also in Israel, a lot of children are killed by Hamas, And so the people who are passing on, guys, here are the children, irrespective of what side of religion that should come out. And so I think God's heart into this is me now being religious here, right? God's heart into this is humanity, not politics. So I think we have come into a position where we as Africa have to bring in a human face to the world. Because to be honest, people who are in Israel, these are Europeans. We might sugarcoat it and say we're Christian. These are Europeans and Arabs. This is the history of violence from Arabs and Europeans. They've been killing each other from crusades to, taking over Africa, and so on and so forth. And so they're prone to violence, but we must bring a human face to the world and say, let's disarm our religious propaganda. Let's disarm our religious psychology. Let's arm ourselves and say we're human beings. Steve Biko said this is what we must bring to the world. We must say the human beings, they are struggling. And so less of profits, less of government interests. We know that these are important things for them. And let's focus on kids are dying there. The elderly are being affected. The differently abled are being affected. I think this is the conversation I would like to get into, not how it economically affects us, because we're not making money from Israel. I'm here in South Africa. Our government is bashing the Israel government because of one statement Nelson Mandela said. But I'm thinking the children in Israel and the children in Palestine,